Hi, fellow travelers. I hope you guys are all doing well today. Today's video is a little bit different. Something I like to talk about a lot on my site, but I haven't talked much on my YouTube channel yet, is books. I love to read. I think everyone should. Anyway, a project that I started in fall of 2020 is to do my best to find regional literature when I travel to help to enhance the place I'm visiting and my own knowledge. So it's been a lot of fun so far. I've done 3. I'll tell you guys all about them later. The latest one in this series is a memoir that I picked up in Aspen, Colorado at Explorer Booksellers, and it's by a wonderful woman who is my guest today. Her book, Those Were the Days, Memories of an Aspen Hippie Chick, enchanted me, and I first started when I was in Aspen and finished it on the drive from Colorado back home. Cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview and safe travels. All right. Thank you so much for getting on this call with me. And I am so sorry that technology is what it is.
No worries. That's just the way it is these days.
I swear, I was just like, it's giving me a heart attack. I even called the husband in here. I was like, you gotta help me. Okay. So again, thank you so much for getting on this call with me. Like I said in my letter and then in my other emails, I really did love your book. I actually have recipes marked. He definitely approved of the brownies. I made them over the weekend. So they were delicious. Hopefully it's going to get cool here soon. And I'm going to try this wild mushroom soup.
It's amazing. Yes, it's amazing.
So it sounds really good.
And that restaurant's not here anymore. So that's also why it's so special to have some of these recipes, because a lot of the restaurants aren't here.
Yeah. Is that why you started with cookbooks first?
No, so actually it's funny. I said I write 3 cookbooks, but the first book I did was Christmas in Aspen. So Christmas in Aspen is actually partial cookbook, but this is a funny story. So I started off where we were going to do a coffee table, beautiful photography book of Christmas trees in Aspen. Because in the 70s, when we wrote this book, you know, we've gone to friends' homes, you know, it was a lot chiller back then. It wasn't so, you know, big parties at these fancy hotels. It was people invited you over for tea or coffee and coffee cake or some kind of a baked good. And you got to see their tree and their kids were there. It was very homey. And so we asked if we could take pictures of their Christmas trees. And everyone was like, yeah, of course. So we got to taking the pictures, and some of them were fabulous, but some were like, you know, can we put a backdrop because there are all those icky bookshelves in the background. We realized, you know, we kind of needed to stage some of them.
Makes sense.
So when we finished at Christmas time, we took pictures outside. We took pictures of Santa Claus. We took pictures of us all dressed up with these beautiful Victorian gown, you know, like those old coats, like caroler coats, and big, beautiful floppy hats. And then we, what we would do is we would go in front of a railroad car. We had all these cool railroad cars then. So we found all these places and then these old sleighs. And we just had so much fun doing all this photography and watching kids make ornaments. So in the springtime, we did a slideshow with my husband, and my husband and I, both in marketing back then. We had an advertising business.
Oh, wow.
And with my friend's husband, who is an artist. And we had all these great pictures and they looked fabulous up on the screen. And both our husbands looked at us and said, you girls are crazy. Do you know how much it costs to do a 4-color coffee table book? Well, we didn't. But of course, we soon found out that there was no way we could afford it. We didn't have any money in our pockets. Nobody would give us a loan. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and went back to those families that we love so much and interviewed them. Mm-hmm. Turns out most of them were from different countries. So we learned that, Christmas is celebrated differently in different countries and they have different customs. So then that sent me to the library to research, how did Kris Kringle come about? And what about, the tinsel on the trees? And so that ended up being a really fun project. And then, my brain is like, okay, well, I have to keep going. So what else am I going to do?
I feel
So
you
then I
there.
went to the school, the little pub, it was a private school in town, and I asked for the kids to write Christmas stories and poems. And so we did a contest and we got some great stories and poems. That was so much fun. And we had a big party at the end. And so we knew we were going to publish those. And then I knew John Denver because he worked right around the corner from us. And I saw him in the mall one day and I'm like, hey, John, do you mind if I publish your book or your story, Alfie the Christmas Tree? Which is this lovely little poem that he had, on the Muppets Christmas show. And he's like, sure, go ahead. So I had to get permission from the Cherry Lane publishing company. And I mean, it was so minimal. It was like $25. Now it would be like,
Yeah, it's a
I think it
fortune.
would be like a few thousand now to get that permission. And then another local guy, Danny Wheatman, who's also a musician, he had done this wonderful poem, The Christmas Wish. And so we did that. And then was kind of like, okay, the book needed a little more oomph. So then I went back to all those families and got recipes. And so the whole third section are all recipes. So then that book ended up being super successful. I borrowed the money from my brother, who was taking a year off and betting on the racetracks because he was tired of being straight and narrow. And he was making a ton of money and I couldn't get any money from the bank. So he loaned me all the money to publish that book.
Well, that was
And
awesome of him.
it's 4-color, but it's 2-color inside. And it's a special book for me because my mom did all the illustrations for it.
Oh,
And
that's sweet.
she's pretty amazing.
Oh my goodness.
And so we made those so it was a 2-color book. So we could have white, and then we could choose like green on one page, and then I'll show you red on the other. So here's an example of the one that's red. So this is called 2-color. And I don't know if you want the whole scoop, but honestly, this was done in the old-fashioned cut and paste. We also have this wonderful little bookmark.
Those are the best.
So what happened was this was in the 70s. So there were no computers really. We typed it on a typewriter, sent it to a typesetter, which there are no such thing as typesetters anymore. And it came out in these big rolls of this really interesting sort of vinyl paper. And then my designer took these boards and outlined them in blue, which doesn't pick up on the print, and then actually cut with an X-Acto knife and pasted them onto these pages. The kids are like, yeah, we know all about cut and paste. I'm like, yeah, you do it on your computer. This is all manual.
That's
So the book
insane.
went to the printer like this thick. And so that was the first book. That was a huge learning experience, but really fun.
Oh my goodness.
And then I did do, so this was the next book, Taste of Aspen, because I was doing the restaurant menu guide of town. So I knew all the restaurant owners. And so when the lady from the bookstore said, your Christmas book is doing great, but we also need a cookbook from Aspen. Can you do that? And I thought, well, now I know how to write a book. Went back and had my mom once again do these beautiful illustrations.
She is a fantastic artist.
Yeah, she used to work for back in the 40s. She worked like at Marshall Fields. She went to the Art Institute, which was very odd back in the 40s for a woman to go to the Art Institute. But she worked for advertising agencies and did fashion design. She was incredible. And
good for her.
Yeah, so I had her do that one. And what I did was I went around to all the restaurants and that I knew, and I knew all of them. So I wrote a little about how the restaurant came to be, what year did it start and what's the food that they serve and who's the chef. And then they would give me like 4 or 5 recipes. And so then I had to have huge parties every Thursday We had big parties. I had jugs of wine. And before the ladies were allowed to have their first glass of wine, they had to critique the recipe to make sure that it was correct. Because a lot of times when you're going from cooking a stew for 50 to 100 people down to 8, which is what I asked the recipe to be for, when they did it
Okay.
by hand, they made some mistakes. So we would have these great parties every single week until the book was done.
That sounds like a ton of
And
fun.
so this book was really fun. And then I updated it a few years later by doing lighter Taste of Aspen, which was lower fat, lower cholesterol recipes.
Okay. So some little bit for the health conscious people here and there.
Yes, but the recipes were all high fat. I mean, the recipes for the dessert, sorry.
Okay.
But the food was all like really carefully plotted out and lower fat. But yes, when it comes to dessert, no.
Oh no. If you're eating dessert, you might as well go full throttle.
That's right.
That's kind of the way we do it here.
Yeah.
We definitely love all the sugar.
Yes.
And
You can't substitute sugar. You cannot substitute butter.
And heavy cream.
No, I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, you can try, but it's not going to be as good.
Nope. I love making homemade whipped cream in the winter. And
Me too.
it just all goes on the hot chocolate and on the pies, and it's so delicious.
So delicious.
Anyway, so from cookbooks, you transitioned into children's and young adult, if I understand correctly.
Yes, absolutely. So I was doing really well with the cookbooks, and I went this sort of convoluted way of saying how I wrote this first children's book. But I was in Nantucket. No, I think it was Martha's Vineyard. Sorry.
Okay.
And there was a line like a block long to get these T-shirts that said it was called the Black Dog Bakery. So people were waiting in line to get food, and then the other line was people that wanted to get the Black Dog T-shirt. So they had all different kinds of Black Dog, and then it said Martha's Vineyard underneath it. So when I got home, I was like, oh, I have a yellow dog. Why don't I do the yellow dog Aspen, Colorado? And they'll be waiting in a block to buy my T-shirts. But the truth was, I didn't own a bakery. My friends did. But the idea of getting 20 different sizes and having T-shirts made up and then storing them in my basement and wholesaling them, I looked into it and it just was not feasible. So I decided that it all came together. I was riding my bike one day and I went, let's see, I have a yellow dog. We got to use him in something. Mm-hmm. So I write books. I have a daughter that's doing these crazy adventures. My husband was on ski patrol and mountain rescue. Why don't I combine it and write a children's book? So I signed up to how to write a children's book at our local college here in Aspen. And the guy called me and said, you're the only one signed up, so I'm not doing the class.
Oh.
And I said, I've already written 3 books. Would you be willing to edit my books? And he said, of course. So we've worked together for many, many years. So this is the first children's book. So this is Adventures of Fraser the Yellow Dog, Rescue on Snowmass Mountain. And this was a story that took place in Snowmass based on, my daughter going skiing there and then always wanted to ski the famous and challenging Hanging Valley Wall. So I knew she was going to get caught in a snowslide, and I was going on a heli ski trip that spring. So I brought my little notebook, and I was going to interview all the guides to see what it felt like to be in an avalanche. Well, none of them had been in an avalanche before, but I got caught the last day, the last run and it was not terrible. It only went to my waist.
That's still scary.
It took about 45 minutes for them to dig me out because you have to be really careful. You can't all go down with shovels. You have to blow up that area and make sure no one else is going to get caught, and I'm not going to get buried even further. So they finally got me out, but I knew what it felt like. It basically, when you're buried in snow, it's like being buried in cement. You cannot move.
Nope.
So it was just so funny because I was like, okay, well, now I know what it feels like, so I can come home and write this book. So that book was super successful. And that led to the same book, but that takes place in Vail because Vail needed their own children's book.
Of course.
So I just changed the name of the restaurant. We had to change a few paintings. So I did that one. And then I did this cross country one. This is Rescue on Star Mountain, which is the dogs on the back, the handsome yellow dog Fraser.
He was so handsome.
So handsome. And this book was fun because this was based on an adventure that my husband and I had where we went up to a ski hut. And my husband, as I said, was on mountain rescue and he had the altimeter and all the stuff. And we got up there. It was a beautiful sunny day. It snowed all night. We had to go home because we had a daughter who was a baby at home. So we needed to get down. The others were staying a couple days. So we take off and, our tracks were completely covered. And so, what we thought was the way, all of a sudden, everything looks so different. It's snowing, tracks are covered. My husband left the altimeter at the cabin.
Oh, no.
We really had no idea what we were doing. And we just kept had skied that area enough that we kind of just had a little intuitiveness about where we were going. And at one point, you could kind of hear noises from the top of the mountain. But anyway, we found our way. But so that's what this book is based on, that they're going to a ski hut, just the girls and the dog. And they get caught in a blizzard. And they build a snow cave. And then the mountain rescue come when they didn't show up at the cabin on time. So there's that one.
I love that these are based off your own experiences, even if it was unintentional the first time.
Oh, yeah. No, they were all definitely based. And then came this one, which is a summer adventure. So this is really fun because I kind of was like, all right, get out of the winter for just a scooch. And so my daughter was preparing for her backpacking trip in 8th grade. And so what the kids have to do is they have to walk up Aspen Mountain, which is a very steep hike, several times to get ready for this hike. So that's what they're doing in this book. They get to the top of the mountain with Fraser and they're having a picnic. And what they intend to do is do a loop and then end up at the gondola, which is at the top of the mountain, and take it down. So they only walk one way. But when they're at their picnic, Fraser takes off running because he knows that there's trouble ahead. The girls follow, and up on top of Aspen Mountain, our town is based on silver mining back in the 1800s.
Okay, cool.
And when silver became devalued, all the huge mine shafts, and they're huge, all of a sudden no one was using them. And they're huge holes in the ground.
Yeah.
So they put these big yellow, keep out, danger, keep out mine shaft. And then they have a yellow, like a police tape around them. But of course, in this story, this puppy is loose and falls down this mine shaft. But instead of going all the way down, there's like a false floor at about 19 feet. This is all based on my neighbor's dog story that really did happen. My neighbor's dog, yellow lab, fell down the mine shaft. And so what they had to do was they couldn't even hear the dog. They didn't even know where the dog was. So they sent for reinforcements. All these people came up. Somebody finally heard this little whimpering. And sure enough, and they looked down. Well, they obviously they couldn't get down there. So one of the guys belayed down and picked the puppy up and saved it.
I'm glad they got the puppy.
So in this book, we didn't want to have to belay the kids down. So what we do is, so they're looking down into the mine shaft here. And Fraser, of course, is so smart. He takes Courtney's backpack and lowers it down with cookies inside so that the puppy jumps in to get the cookies. And then they haul the puppy up.
That is actually really brilliant.
So he's brilliant. So when they get to the top of the mountain, the puppy is fine. It's thirsty, it's injured, and they build like a travois, which is like a sled. And they take it, they call up their vet meets them at the top of the mountain, and they find a little note on the collar that says, "My name is Maggie, and my owners had to leave town, and if you find me, please give me a good home. I'm well behaved. And
Oh,
of course, Courtney and Fraser adopt Maggie. So now Maggie's in the stories. So then the next one, which is now Fraser and Maggie are in this one. And they're the real Fraser and Maggie on the back.
oh, they are so good looking. Such good looking dogs.
Oh, beautiful. So then this one I wrote before we rafted the Grand Canyon. But while we were on the canyon, I used some of, the things that I learned. And so this is a river rafting one where the girls go rafting. And of course, it's Fraser and Maggie. And we had a long time ago a bear break in to our house.
Oh no.
Four
Oh,
bears inside my house.
was it a mama and cubs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so I knew I'd always put the bears into one of my stories. So the girls are, after a long day of on the river, they're camping and they're having s'mores. And the number one rule that they know is to raise their food up into the tree, which they do, but they leave a candy wrapper in the raft.
Oh no.
So at night, the tricky bears come and claw their raft. So when they wake up, their raft is unraftable. But of course, they're so smart, they know how to pump it up. And then they go do this big falls. This is Ragged Rock.
Oh goodness.
And they're not supposed to hit it, but they do. And they fall over and they get separated. But of course, it's Courtney and Maggie and the other girls and Fraser. He comes and finds them and brings it back to their friends. And they have a safe float out at the end. So that's this one. And then the last of the Fraser children's books is this Rescue on Maroon Bells, which is also based on when Courtney was in second grade. Usually the Bells, the lake at the Bells, which is just, the most photographed mountains in the world.
They're so gorgeous.
You were up there, so you
yes.
know. Well, what happened is it was cold, but it didn't snow very much. So the road was closed. Well, it's closed in this story, but it was open. And the lake froze, which it hadn't done in 50 years. So we pulled our daughter out of school. We all took our ice skates up and we skated for 3 days up there. We had set up hockey nets and we just, I mean, I can't even, so that's why this picture is so cool, because it shows her. I mean, it's kind of a famous shot, really, because it just didn't happen. And it's happened a couple times since. But anyway, so that they go up there and they have a skating adventure. And they bring all their skates and their hockey players and they have their nets. And they test the ice. But then Maggie, being a puppy that she is, takes off with the puck. And Courtney goes over. And then, of course, the ice is thin. And she almost falls all the way through, but she has these isols that Mountain Rescue uses. And if you go out in the backcountry, they tell you you should always have these orange isols. And what it is, if you fall through, they're sort of spring loaded.
Okay.
So you have them through your jacket. And then if you're going in, you go like this and they're like picks, ice picks. They're called,
I didn't know.
They're called Picks for Life. And I only know about it because my husband's Mountain Rescue. And I thought they were so cool. And I used to, play around with them and stuff. And then I was like, well, I'll just add them into the book because they'll keep her from going all the way in. And that was based on this true story of my husband when he was about 9. We are from Illinois and he fell through the ice and had to be rescued by a neighbor who just happened to see him. But he didn't go like this where he was up to here. He went all the way under.
Oh gosh.
And in Denver every year they have it on the news that somebody goes to get their dog who's fallen in the ice and then they go in too. So the rule that the girls of course know about is don't get too close or you'll go into. So they throw her a rope and they pull her out. Of course, it's Fraser's idea.
Of course.
So that's the end of this one. So the Mountain Rescue people come up after they've already saved her and she's all happy. And then they go to Paradise Bakery for a snack afterwards. So that was kind of the end of that one. And then I published Fraser's memoir. So I tried to find it downstairs. I'm completely sold out of them, but it's a cute little book, and it's all from his point of view.
Oh,
He talks about, you know, being torn away from his mother in Kansas and ending up in Aspen. And he talks about how scared he was when he came to our house and Scratchy the cat. You know, it's all done in cartoons.
yeah.
And so that was a really fun book. And I talked about the bears, and Fraser actually had a column in the newspaper that was called Just Ask Fraser. So dogs would write in and ask
The best
like
thing.
Deerlanders. So we put letters from different dogs in there, and so that was a fun book. And then we did some quizzes at the end for people to win a prize, and so that was fun. And then after that one, let's see, I did the Blue Bottle. So that's this one, and this one takes place in the Caribbean.
Oh, going a little bit farther south.
It takes the family from Aspen down to the Caribbean to sort of a fake island called Passive Island, which is my husband and daughter and I used to sail a lot. We had a boat down in the Caribbean until it sunk in Irma in 2017. And so we would go down 2 or 3 times a year and sail. And so this book is based on all of our adventures down there. And so it kind of brings another girl into the story who is in trouble and they have to go save her. So that's more young adult. And then after that one, I kind of changed gears and I wrote this book, which is about Kip. So this is my daughter's dog. So my daughter's now grown up with a family of her own, and this is her dog. And this is for younger kids. It's just basically a travel log around Aspen. Like it has the popcorn wagon, it has the farmer's market, and it has the music tent, and it has the gondola. And so that was, I did that one in 2018.
Okay.
And then of course the memoir.
Awesome. So yeah, was there a transition from going from this fiction, even though it was based off some of your real experiences, to something that's actually about you?
Yeah, so the memoir was interesting. I'd always toyed with, I read so many. I always read people's memoirs. And my dad had actually written just a little spiral bound book. And I thought, how cool that was, because when he died, we all had this book. And it was very factual. It wasn't like, tongue in cheek like I did mine. But it was like, I was born here and I don't really know exact birth date because my birth certificate was lost, and, those kind of stories. And I married Ruth in this day, and I had the, it was more but I appreciated the fact that he had done this. And I thought that I'd always wanted to do this project, always. And my husband was still alive when I started it. And well, you probably read in the beginning that I was up in Canada and I had read this guy's book.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, well, he thinks he has adventures. I mean, I have adventures.
So you've had a ton of adventures.
And so I went, he's much younger than I am. And, I realized that the cabin, I've been to the area where his family built the cabin, there were some funny stories that he had about, the hippies building his parents' cabin naked, smoking pot all day. Actually, the guy who wrote the book is like a radio star. And he had some funny potluck stories and stories about, how he was sort of a belligerent child. He didn't want to go up there because he got car sick and he got boat sick and his father flew them up and he used to get plane sick. And then years later, of course, it became his favorite place in the world. But the whole time I'm reading this book, I am like, I have to do this. I just have to do this. So I started plotting it out. And it was funny. Well, it wasn't really that funny, but my husband had a stroke the spring before. And so he was on Coumadin, which makes you bleed. Ooh. And so the working title for the book was Blood and Beats, because we would wake up every morning and there was blood all over his side of the bed because he would cut himself, and it wasn't like ravaging blood, but little
Yeah.
blood here and there. And then he had all these beaded bracelets that he got when we were in Kenya, and he had his favorite one, and it was starting to unravel. So every morning I'd wake up, besides the blood, there were beads in the bed. So that was the first title. And then he did pass away while I was, I'm sure you read that too, while I was working on the project. But it was really good for me because I was able to go back when I was having sad moments and sort of make it more joyous by laughing about the good times that we had, because the whole book was set just in the 70s in Aspen.
Yeah.
After we got married in 79, we had this business, we bought a house. And then, it wasn't like we didn't have any adventures.
I was gonna say, you seem to have a ton.
But the adventures changed from being like, the hitchhiking and the place in Lanedo and all that to all of a sudden, oh, I guess we have to work on our septic system. And, no, we can't go out and play. We have to work on this project, and we have to mold, we became mature adults.
We just bought our first house this year, so we're learning that.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing than just being footloose and fancy free. So when you asked about that, no, it wasn't hard for me at all because I was in the mode of wanting to do this. And I think all my books are so based on my stories. Somehow they come through that it wasn't hard at all. I just fell right into it.
All right. Is there a particular memory that just, always brings a smile to your face when you think about it from the book?
Yes, Lanedo. So Lanedo, I live 2 miles up a mountain right now. Then I've lived here since the 70s. And if you went down the hill and across the highway, and then about half a mile is the Woody Creek Tavern, which is a very famous, I don't know if you went there when you were in Aspen, but that's where Hunter Thompson hung out. And it's a very old, funky tavern. And then you go down a little ways, and then you drive these 12, 13 miles up to this logging town of Lanedo. And as you read, we couldn't find a place to live the first winter we were together. So I found this cabin, and it was basically smaller than my kitchen is right now. And I went and I said, oh, this will be so much fun. We could come up here on the weekends and cross country ski, because there was tons of cross country. I mean, logging roads everywhere you looked. You could take a snowmobile, you could ski, you could cross country. And I thought, oh, so quaint up here. All we really need to do is get a potbelly stove and get some heat in here. And like literally a month and a half later, we had no place to live. Nobody wanted 4 dogs and 4 people all the way down valley. So we couldn't find a place. So meanwhile, this place was $20 a month. So
nothing.
We put the $20 down, thinking we just come up on the weekends. Well, when we didn't have a place to live, we decided, the guy was so cool. I mean, now you have to have building permits. But back then, we said to the guy, we want to build 2 bedrooms. He goes, I don't care. Just do whatever you want to do. No building permits. Well, there was no electricity. There was no plumbing.
Oh, gosh.
No running water. So, I mean, it was like, sky's the limit. If you want to build onto this rickety old cabin, have a nice time. So we spent about 3 weeks building these 2 bedrooms, and you had to crawl to get into them. And we worked down in town, and most everyone, it was a working sawmill in the 70s. So they had all these, machines, and because it was below all the logging roads.
Right.
And so what they would do is bring it. I mean, it was just like a real working mill. And so all the people there, except for us, worked in the mill, because why would you live all the way up there unless you were working in the mill? But we all had ski jobs. I was working at the Highlands restaurant, and my husband was managing with his friend the buttermilk rental shop. So we would get up at 6:30 in the morning and drive down to town, go to the bakery and have a donut and some coffee, because we had no place to cook. We didn't even have the potbelly stove in yet. And we just had like tons of sleeping bags, and we finally got the potbelly stove. And then, we had to cut wood every night. So I think you read that I got a chainsaw for my 21st birthday.
Yes, and you said it was the best gift you'd gotten.
Still to this day, hands down, best gift I've ever had, because those were, in that day, that was kind of an expensive gift.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we needed it, and my parents, my straight parents gave it to us, kind of crazy. And so we'd come home at 10 o'clock at night, buzzing wood for the evening. And then we didn't even have a fire going. So it would take another 45 minutes to get warm, and then get up and do it the next day.
Oh my gosh. Just, wow. That is just fantastic.
So that was really fun. And the last time I went, our cabin was pancaked down to the ground, but there's still wood. And I've gathered a few pieces of the wood, and I found one of the numbers that they actually put on the cabin years later.
Oh,
It goes off the piece of wood too, but it's still there. And so that brings me smiles. And I go up at least once or twice a year with my daughter and grandbabies, and we take chairs and we just hang out by the cabin, and it's really fun.
that's good that you got, bringing everybody there, and they all you can see the memories, or at least is what's left of them.
Exactly.
Were there any stories that didn't make it into the book?
Oh, yes. Many, many that were definitely X-rated that couldn't get in there. I mean, Aspen was wild in those days. And of course, I would have loved, I always wanted a column in the paper. There's this one lady, Mary Eshbaugh Hayes, that had a column for years and years and years and years. And it was like, Laci and her husband had a baby, Sally, and Sally weighed 4 pounds, 9 ounces. And so was getting married, and then pictures of the sort of the social thing.
Yeah.
And I always used to laugh and say, Mary, I'm going to take over your column, but mine's is going to be Jill's double scoops. And I'm going to write about the scoops in town. Because, I was in town, I worked in town, I had that rose business. I knew everything and everybody. And it was like, I mean, her column was nice, but let's give the scoops out. But of course, you couldn't do that because you would be hated.
Right.
It's like, the stuff that ends up in Inquirer magazine or something, if they
my
knew
goodness.
the person who wrote it, they'd kill them. But yeah, everyone it was the 70s, people rock and roll, sex, rock and roll, drugs. So I tamed down a lot. And then of course I have a daughter. So there were a lot of stories that I didn't need to tell her. And
fair.
So yes, I could have written about 20 more stories, but I decided, there's certain ones I edited out, obviously, but it was fun to still write them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of characters in Aspen, and I could have written about, I can't even tell you, so many. Like there's this guy, Ralph Jackson, who was like a dirty old man. And I'll just answer that. So
yeah, go for it.
Listen to that. I'll just say yes and no. So he wore a big, tall black hat and dressed kind of like with a, sort of coat, like he was just a celebrity. And he always had a big pipe or cigar, and he did tricks on skis.
Oh my goodness.
But he was a dirty old man. There were a lot of those back in those days. So you had to definitely keep your distance from certain people.
I could see that.
It's kind of like you hear about these towns that are refuges for artists and dropouts and people that just want to, live on top of the mountain or live in Lanedo and just sort of, not that we got away from it, but hermits. And there's so many characters in our town. And there's still some, but they're not as many as they used to be. And when I launched that, the memoir in 2019, right before Christmas, I didn't take an ad out. They did an article about my book. And at the very end, it said, come to Jill's party tomorrow at the Mountain Chalet. There'll be free food and cash bar and free music.
All right.
So when we set up, the guy said, well, how many seats? And I said, I think, 40 will do it. Like 450 people showed up. You couldn't even get in to the door.
That is fantastic.
We had so much fun, and I had a band playing, They were all old locals. And it was just the wild, you couldn't even get through. And then, so at a certain point, I read us one of the chapters, the Lanedo story, to everyone. And then I said, okay, I know you all out there, some of you I haven't seen in years, and I'm giving the microphone to you guys
Oh
because it's
no.
your turn to tell your story. Well, they were standing in line waiting to get that, the Moth Story Hour.
Yeah.
It could have been the Moth Story Hour. I mean, they were like, hand me that microphone. I want to talk about the time that I did this. And I want to talk about the time that I ski out of bounds and almost ended up in jail. I mean, oh my God, the stories. And of course, they were their stories. They weren't mine to print, but we shared them. And I just did an author talk about a month ago at one of the libraries. And I did the same thing. I'm like, all right, I've told my story. It's your turn to tell yours. And they were all, again, people that had lived here back in those days. And people just keep saying, there's just nothing like those times. It'll never be like that again, where, you could walk around smoking a joint and the police would say, hey, have a nice day. Now you can again.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's getting there.
But it was illegal then. Now it's legal. So, we obviously didn't have pot shops like we do here now.
Yeah.
But yeah, and all the famous people would come and eat at all the restaurants. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah, now they all have their own places on
they
the
have
mountain.
their own homes. They fly in their own chefs. But in those days, I mean, I waited on James Taylor, Tom Cruise. I waited on Barbara Streisand.
Oh wow.
I mean, I could go down the list. And they were just normal, nice people. It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, that is so neat.
It just doesn't happen anymore.
Did you sell them roses?
I sold quite a few of those famous people roses. Yes, I did.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, that was kind of wild. And some of the people, literally not the famous ones, but I had guys who would be like, how much is your rose basket? And I said, well, it's, I don't sell the basket because it was a really nice gift. But I would say, well, there are 100 flowers in here. If you want to buy it, it's $100. Sure. Hand $100 to me and say, sit down and join us for dinner.
Oh my goodness. Oh, just, you can't do that anymore. That's part of the reason I loved your book. It's just, it's stuff that we can't get away with anymore. And
can't get away with.
Well, even when I was growing up, there was too much, cameras and recording and
yeah.
And so definitely couldn't have done any half of this. We've done some crazy stuff, but it's before we all had cell phones.
Yeah, you have to be careful you're not filmed anymore.
Exactly. And of course, half the time we willingly film all this crazy stuff we do. I just don't. I don't need video evidence of that.
So what did you do when you were in Aspen?
We visited the Maroon Bells, and then we kind of just explored. We didn't have a ton of time. We was kind of towards the end of our trip, but my husband really wanted to see the bells. We got my grandmother's old Polaroid camera, and so we took a ton of pictures of the Maroon Bells, and we're playing with the settings, and just we wanted something that was a bit more physical that we could take with us. But yeah, we just explored Aspen the next morning before we had to head out.
Well, I'm so glad you stopped in to explore.
we can't walk by a bookstore without walking into it.
Yeah, that's how we do too.
And I have a rule that I'm not allowed to buy anything that I can buy at home.
Right. I the same thing.
Because there's a ton of books that I want, but I try and find something that really has the heart of the place. And your book was just the perfect one for this.
Thank you.
Like I said, I love the recipes. Do you have a favorite that's in this book?
Well, I would say the brownies was one of my favorites because, of course, I used to make that all the time. Sometimes we put a little, in there.
All right.
And let's take a look here. Of course, the other story is my friend Barbara Guy, who is the most hilarious person on the planet. That was the one about the women that were having the ice cream fight.
Was that on the boats?
That was, yes. And every time I go up to the lake, which I do once a week, I think about those ladies. And let's see, Sigrid died, Yordis died, and Helen died. So Barbara's the only of those four that's still alive. And I just had lunch with her. She's hilarious. But her peppermint ice cream, I love.
I saw that one. That one's on the list for this next summer.
Oh,
Um,
good.
yeah,
Yeah, and what about the Bundy chapter? What'd you think of that?
that's terrifying, and I did not realize that he was in Aspen. To tell you the truth,
Yep.
I don't follow the true crime stuff. My
Well,
stepmom does.
I mean, he was. I would never watch that because he was a brutal. Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
no,
Can
I was really interested to read it from the perspective of somebody that was there, and they had to live with those concerns and those fears. But I wouldn't necessarily go watch the memoir about him or the biopic or whatever
no,
they're
I
called
wouldn't either.
nowadays.
He was just too evil for me,
Mhm.
and especially the fact that he was here. I mean, that was
And then he
great.
escaped. Like that whole
Twice.
thing. Yeah, it was just. I read that and I was like, whose idea was this? Like, letting him out by himself. He's just like,
Well, and the thing that's so crazy is that after he escaped out of Aspen, that he was able to escape out of Glenwood and then kill more women. That was really pathetic.
yeah, and that,
The jailers should have all been fired.
yeah,
And
but
the fact that he shrunk small enough that he fit through, I mean,
mm-mm.
weren't they noticing that he was getting skinny? And weren't they noticing that maybe they ought to watch a convicted, almost convicted murderer?
Who
No.
knows what they were thinking?
Yeah.
But no, it was really fascinating to read it because, like I said, I did not realize he was there during that time. But scary.
Yes.
But it's good to be aware of the history and the location and kind of how this affected y'all's kind of carefree lifestyle.
Right.
Just
We were petrified. All the
yeah,
women were petrified
that's
until he finally got put away. But as I say, the really sad thing for us was, when you look back, because I had to do a lot of research to make sure I had my facts and figures right, was that they caught him and they just didn't look in his car because he looked so like, the
innocent.
boy next door. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, talk about profiling. They should have profiled him, but he got caught for this and he got caught, and he had ladies' pantyhose and he had all these pictures, and they just never checked him.
Oh,
And they kept and then he kept murdering people. So to me, that was the horror of the story, that they should have been smarter, and they could have prevented all these
yeah,
horrible extra murders. But
it's
hopefully we've learned from that.
fingers crossed. Well, let's move on to something hopefully a little bit happier. How do you feel that Aspen has changed over the years since
Oh,
you?
you had great questions, by the way.
Thank you.
It's funny. I didn't think Aspen had changed. I mean, obviously it's changed a lot. All the mom and pop stores are pretty much gone. We have
Which makes
Burberry.
it sad.
It is, and Chanel, and all the name brands.
Yeah.
Most of us locals, we do not go into town and shop. We still go into town. We get our mail, and we ski, and we go to eat because we still love all the restaurants. But how has it changed? Well, I think the money, you go out to the airport anytime, but maybe 2 weeks in November and maybe April to May, end of April to May, maybe 2 months, maybe not that much. And you will see more jets than you can even believe.
You don't even have to go very close. We drove past it on the way in, and there's a ton, and they're flying in, and
they come in, they have their second home, which is worth like $12 million, bring their chef, bring their cleaning ladies, and have their Range Rovers. And, I don't have a problem with second homeowners because they do pay taxes, but they're not part of the community. And I think
right.
that's the thing that I miss, because they say back in the day, they mingled, they had no problem getting on a lift with you and eating next to you at Bonnie's. And now, they have to get a special part of the restaurant, and they have to, as I say, eat at home and have their private chef cook for them because they don't want the paparazzi. Well, then also during COVID last year, that was when I saw the biggest change, because people from different states, they were holed up in their motel rooms, or I mean, sorry, not motel, their condos in the high rises, and they were stuck. So they came out to Aspen, sight unseen, and bought multi-million-dollar houses.
Oh, fun. So they can hang out.
It was great for the real estate agents, but for the locals, we kind of got inundated with what we would have thought were tourists that would leave town who moved here.
Oh,
So the grocery stores were so crazy crowded and the traffic was horrible. So that part of it, I would say, I don't love. That's how much it's changed. But still, if you go to the post office, you run into your friends. You go to the grocery store, you run into your friends. You go to the Wheeler Opera House to hear a concert or go to a movie, you'll run into your friends. And that part I love. But there's this little town in Basalt where my daughter lives, right down the pike. And that's kind of the new Aspen. And so is Carbondale, where you can walk down the street and you know everyone.
okay.
And there's mom and pop shops
Those are the
and
best.
no paid parking, which is another thing in Aspen that you have to do. You have to pay to park.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I would say, I mean, I still love Aspen. Don't get me wrong. I still love it. I love the people. I love the colors of the mountains. I love skiing on those mountains. I love walking the trails. I was just at the John Denver Sanctuary, and because the big John Denver celebration is coming up this week, and or next week, I should say. So I love those aspects. I love, we have theater out in the park. We have concerts. But I think the town itself, it's just sad to me that it's changed, but it's the way the world is.
It is. I did like how Aspen had a ton of parks, and
Yes.
that part of, since we were in Aspen, we walked everywhere. We stayed at or parked at our hotel. They just let us hang out there. And then
Where did you stay?
the Tyrolean Lodge.
Oh, Tyrolean. Okay, now that is old Aspen.
We loved it. We spent so much time looking at all the posters and pictures on the walls and all the old ski equipment.
So their kids are friends of mine.
Oh,
and nice. The parents have now passed away, but that big sculpture outside.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
He did that. He was sculptor. And he had his studio out back, which I think he moved to his house because the real estate was so much. Right. But that is one of those, that and the Mountain Chalet are two of the old family-run hotels. And they are not like fancy. Mm-mm. And they're just those are the places I would stay if I came to Aspen.
We loved it. It was because we had just come from the Black Canyon. So there's no showers up there or anything. So we'd camped, we'd stayed up late to watch the sunset, look at the stars since it is a dark sky park. And then we got up early and watched sunrise. And then we drove over to the North Rim to hike before driving to Aspen. So we were just done. And the lodge was great because we got in, it was super easy.
Oh, yeah.
Showered, crashed for a little bit, and then got up again to go to see the bells. Like, it was a crazy trip.
Where did you eat when you were in Aspen?
Let's see. We ate meat and cheese for dinner.
I love meat and cheese.
We got it was so busy. We sat at the bar and we actually asked the bartender which one was the best. And so we got the chicken because he said it was he said they brine it and it's so good. So we did that one.
Organic too. It's really good.
And then we had to get a cookie board for dessert.
Oh, I didn't know they had a cookie board.
Mm-hmm. And they have vanilla.
They have vegan ice cream there too.
Ooh, good to know for next time. They had a vanilla honey milk that I absolutely loved. But I love stuff like that. And then for breakfast the next morning, I have it. Travel journal.
I do the same thing. I carry my travel journal.
Because if I don't, I'm like, where did I go? What did I do?
My girlfriends call me and say, we were in Costa Rica 4 years ago. What was the name of that town? And I just grabbed that journal.
It was, local coffee, because everything else was there was a ton of lines. So we just went and got some coffee and pastries and sat inside and enjoyed it. It was really nice. And then for dinner, we went to the Aspen Pie, or lunch, we went to the Aspen Pie Shop before we left.
Aspen Pie Shop?
They had pizza and local beer. Both of us ate for under $20 and we were like,
was it propaganda pie?
I said it was Aspen Pie Shop. It was next to one of the little parks. There was a bunch of outside seating.
I think I know which one it is. It's it used to be like 5 different restaurants, but it was right near where they had the Food and Wine next to that. Yes.
Yeah, and then they make the square pizzas, and they, so you, instead of the traditional slice, it's the big square one or rectangle ones.
Yeah.
No, it was really good. And then we headed back to where we were staying with some family in Salida and packed up the next morning and went and picked up the dog.
Perfect. Oh, sounds like you had a great trip.
It was a really busy trip. Yeah, because in addition to, so backtracking a little bit, we'd done St. Elmo and fed the chipmunks, and then went up to the Alpine Tunnel Trail and hiked to the whichever ends collapse that you can get to. Where else do we go?
We should have gone up Elk Camp because they have the Alpine slide and the climbing wall, and there's so much to do up there.
I was gonna say, we just didn't have time. We went up to, we did the Phantom Canyon Road and went over to Victor and drove through Cripple Creek. We didn't stop in Cripple Creek because we're not gamblers. But yeah, there was a lavender place near lavender farm near Cotopaxi we stopped at called
nice.
Colorado Mountain Lavender. We actually, we met them at the Salida Farmers Market, but they're like, hey, if you come out to our farm, we're open tomorrow. We've got ice cream, and you can, the fields we still have a couple fields we haven't harvested yet that are really pretty. So it was really nice. They had
I love lavender,
blackberry lavender ice cream, and it was so good.
Oh.
They also have this, I love the mountains, but my hands can't handle it. And so they had this great, I think I called it pearl butter lotion with avocado oil and lavender oil. It was so good. It smells so good.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, we had a great time on the trip. I definitely would love to, I've been to Colorado multiple times. I definitely would love to just take my time and go see everything, because there are so many trails that we just drove past, and I was like, I could stop there. It's stop there. We could hike all of these.
Right.
Just, yeah.
When you were at Maroon Bells, did you hike to Crater Lake?
We did not. We were there in the evening, and like I said, after having hiked the north rim of the Black Canyon, we were just done. And so we went and took our pictures and hung out for a little bit, but it was really popular, and some of the trails were closed for restoration, I think. Okay. So we didn't go to anything too crazy. We just enjoyed ourselves.
You should see it now. I'm just gonna bring my camera and show you. I don't know if you can see, but outside my window.
Oh, look at the aspen trees and all the color. Oh, that is fantastic.
Oh, so we live up this brush creek. And so that all the brush is magnificent right now. It's just glowing.
See, here in Texas, it's still green, and eventually it'll just turn brown. We might get a little bit of gold. To get really color, we have to go to a pumpkin patch. Or a sunflower field, which we do have on occasion.
Yeah, oh, that's sweet. But it's just right now we're at the height of the colors. It's unbelievable.
I love it. So me thinking of really wishing I had a van to live in for a little while to explore some of this. What are you thinking about? What do you think about the revitalization of this lifestyle and people, tricking out these vans? And
I love it. I love it. So a lot of my daughter's friends come with those tripped out vans, and they plant their vans in her backyard and hang out with her for a week. And I think it's fabulous. I don't like to get behind them on the highway myself.
That's fair.
I went to ride last year, and oh my goodness, so many slow vans, but I think it's great. I think it's just, I have friends he was a musician in Aspen, and he had heart issues. So they had to leave Aspen because he was on oxygen all the time.
Oh.
They had an Airstream, and they're like in their mid 70s. And they live in their Airstream, and they drive it. They were in Texas for a year during COVID.
Okay.
And they hook it up to, friends' farms and water. And then they go to these different parks, and, they have to be in low altitude. They're having a blast.
Oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry he has heart problems, but I'm glad that he's not letting it stop him.
Yeah, they've continued to just have a really lovely lifestyle. And I can't picture them, because he's a very big boy, getting in and out of that little tiny van every day, but they've made it work, and they've saved a ton of money.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We like to joke about eventually we'll do that, but right now working on the house, working on savings, and then we'll worry about the van.
Well, congratulations buying your first
Thank
house.
you. Yeah, it was cheaper. Well, let me phrase that. Our mortgage is cheaper than our rent was going to be.
Yes.
Um, it was going to raise up a ton, and we managed to find one that was not on market yet. There were a couple of issues with the title, but once all that got sorted out, we paid for what it was worth. And
now you have equity and you have an
yes,
asset.
and my dog has a yard. My husband has an office. He works from home, and so he was working in the living room for all of 2020, and now he has an office and he loves it.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, it's been really nice. Working on my library, I have a ridiculous number of books, and so there's this nice inset that we're going to build out, and I can put all my books up there and actually have them in order instead of just shoved into the temporary bookshelves that they are now.
Well, I was really honored when you sent me that email. That was so sweet of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Like I said, I finished your book, and so how I found your website was I put everything on Goodreads just for my own self. And I went to your author profile, and then I found your website from there. And I was just like, why not? Might as well do it.
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, it was just so nice to get that email.
Good.
I love to hear from my peeps.
So are you working on anything new?
I am. In fact, I was with my designer today. I'm working on a new children's book that, if Ingram is going to be done on time, we'll have it by Christmas. It's a Christmas children's book.
Very nice. So I obviously don't need a children's book, but I have a family's weird. I'm actually going to a 2-year-old's birthday party this weekend. And she might need a new Christmas book.
Well, there you go.
So that'd be perfect.
So I'll send you some information when it's done. I've got this amazing illustrator up in Canada who's a friend of mine, and she's just, the stuff that she has done for this book is just fantastic.
Cannot wait to see it. So a big part of your book was that you just followed what you felt was right for you and moved to Aspen. Do you have any advice for people that are scared to take that first step into doing what they feel is right for them?
Advice. That's hard for me to do because for me, I was really young and naive. I mean, I went to college at 17.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were that young.
Yeah. And I was just so unworldly. I mean, I'd never traveled, like you kids nowadays, when you're in high school, you go on these spring vacations. We never did any of that. And so for me, the minute I got out of my hometown, came up to the mountains and realized I could hitchhike to the mountains to go skiing and I could live here. I mean, the doors just kept opening. I don't know if that would be the case for kids these days. I mean, everything's more expensive. And you kind of have to have a job that gives you benefits. Now, see, I didn't know that for 100 years because our insurance back when I was 20 and up was so cheap.
That's fair.
And my daughter works for herself and her husband works for himself. And their insurance with 2 kids is almost like a mortgage every month, along with their mortgage. So when I hear people, they say, oh, I got this job. I don't really love it, but it pays my insurance and I have, good benefits when I retire. That never, ever was in my wheelhouse, ever. I mean, it was like we worked for whatever we worked for. I mean, I was pretty entrepreneurial in the fact that, the other job that I loved that I didn't write about was I cleaned house up in Starwood, which is where all the rich and famous live. And I loved that job. I cleaned a 6-bedroom house once a week.
Oh my gosh.
And got the beautiful views and worked the parties. And so I worked that job along with the other jobs I was working. So I was making really good money. But if my insurance had been high and my rent had been high, and I, didn't have a car for many years until I got that little RV Jeep. And then, I think my insurance for that Jeep was really cheap too, but I think that everything was inexpensive.
Right.
If That's it fair. Was the 2021 where things are now, I would probably have found a job with benefits.
In Denver?
Being so entrepreneurial. So I don't know. I mean, it would be hard for me to say, oh yeah, just drop everything and move to the town you want to go and you'll find a job and you'll find this. no one ever gave me that advice. I just lucked out. Like my daughter has a vision board.
Yeah.
It was like, I didn't know about that back in those days, but it was like I created my own vision board in my mind. Like, well, why couldn't I go to Aspen? And why couldn't I, do this? And why couldn't I do that? And one thing led to another, If you needed a place, to live and you didn't have one in between houses, somebody always needed you to house sit. And so it was like the Aspen network. Everyone could tell you, oh, like when I worked for Claudine that year, I found out through the grapevine that she needed somebody and her usual house sitter couldn't do it. So that I jumped in and got that job. So it was pretty easy back then. I don't know how easy it is now because I'm not in that position.
No, that's probably not dropping everything and thinking things through is actually probably the best advice you could give.
I don't know, but then if it didn't turn out, I would feel terrible.
But thinking things through is always probably the best way to proceed, I think.
Yeah. No, I definitely think so. I mean, my daughter had a plan. Every step along the way, she kind of had a plan, just because I think she felt like she needed to.
Yeah, as someone who has journals full of plans for various things and puts everything on my calendar, and everything on my husband's on the calendar, so I know what he's doing, make sure I don't plan family stuff when he's got things going on. No, I get that. But oh my goodness. So is Explore Books the best way for people to find a copy of your memoir?
So they can get it at Explore if they're in Aspen. I have several stores that sell my books.
Okay, cool.
So Carl's across the way is a drugstore. They sell it. Near Poppycock's, which was across the street from where you went to local, there's a little store called Aspen Eclectic.
Okay.
And they sell it. Then there's stores in Snowmass. And then there's stores in Carbondale. So, and they can also get it through Amazon. They could do that, Kindle.
Okay, cool.
Or they can get a print book through Amazon, or they can get a signed copy from me if they just wrote me at jillsheeleybooks@gmail.com.
I will link all of that when I get this up and posted. Awesome.
Great. Oh, well, you're so cute. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much for talking to me. And I'm sorry for the technical difficulties.
It happens all the time. And I'm sorry about this. It's funny, when I first came on, it was so bright, and now it looks like it's really dark back there. So I hope that's not a problem.
It happens. I can see you. And there was plenty of light earlier, so it'll be all right. But anyway, thank you so much. And again, love the book.
Thanks, Laci.
Read it all in one sitting. So it was wonderful talking to you today.
On the new book.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a good evening. All right, all. I hope you guys enjoyed speaking with Miss Jill Sheeley. She is incredible, and she's had quite the experiences in life. I highly suggest picking up a copy of Those Were the Days, Memoirs of an Aspen Hippie Chick, and definitely check out all the recipes in the back. As you can see, I have mine tabbed. If you want to read my review of her book, it'll be on my blog, McGee Travel Trails. And when it is live, I will link it in the notes. If you want to support me and help me find new books and new authors to interview, please feel free to check out my Patreon. I will also link that in the notes. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share it, and I will see y'all next time.